The Problematic Prince. Gladys gently turned the pages of the photo album with thin, bony fingers. She paused when she came to a picture of a young 19-year-old woman in her spring. It was a wedding photo, the same one that spread all over Lucian and Lars, the very pride of the two nations unified. How could I not love this man? She thought to herself. Looking back at it now, she couldn't believe how she had let herself be blinded by infant love, but maybe she couldn't have been any less foolish. She loved Gerald Owen. He was a good man, the genius poet of Lars, the crown princess lover and Karl's father. Gladys turned over to the next page. She was met with the deep, stern eyes of her lover. He had such a youthful handsomeness about him. Tears welled and blurred the picture of Gerald. Flipping the page again, the tears came out in a full-blown stream down her cheeks. The picture was that of Karl, who looked just like his father. Karl Dniester. Bjorn had never seen the child, but at least gave him the royal family name. That was the price of the secret pact between Lucian and Lars, and thanks to that, Karl was able to live his short life with honor. "Thank you and sorry," Gladys said to the picture of Karl. She met Gerald at a routine social gathering in the spring of 17, about the time when the talk of marriage was on everyone's lips. It wrenched her heart to know that it could never, but the love was like an uncontrollable fever. She constantly dreamed of giving up everything and follow her dream, run away with Gerald and never look back. Gladys had to submit to her reality and accept her marriage to Bjorn. In her belly, she could never dream of what was growing there. On the day everyone found out that Gladys was with child, Bjorn looked at her with scorn. She wished they had slept together and she could have pretended that child was his, but they had not so much as hugged. Gladys couldn't bear the thought of letting another man touch her, not after meeting her one true love and the passion they had shared. She didn't want to betray him. On their wedding night, she apologized pathetically to Bjorn. "I'm sorry," Gladys had said. "It's okay, princess," Bjorn said. "Let me know when you're feeling confident enough. Until then, I'll be waiting." In the morning shared an awkward breakfast, and the morning after, and the day after that, and so on. All the while, Karl grew inside Gladys' tummy. For a long time, Gladys couldn't accept another man into her bed because of the memory of her first true love. Then came a certain point where Bjorn turned and became too frightening and difficult to approach. So spring passed by, summer came, and with it, the news of the crown princess pregnancy. If only she hadn't let herself get involved in immature love. If only she had been clever enough to play the game and fool everyone else. If only she had the confidence to do what needed to be done, then everyone wouldn't be so unhappy now. Gladys sobbed softly as a chilly breeze blew across her. She hated her own frankness and inability to deceive. It was hard to bear the hatred, and her heart felt like it was going to explode. "Keep it quiet. We will keep things as they are for now," Bjorn had said when Gladys confessed to him. He did not raise his voice or show any anger. It was actually a lot scarier. "I mean to congratulate you on your pregnancy, so be happy and carry on as the great crown princess you've been so far. Do you understand, princess?" On the surface, the days continued on as normal, blissful happiness of the newlyweds. Tranquility layers over the top of scrupulous lies. If Gladys had given birth to a daughter, they could have continued on like that indefinitely. But a son was born. Gladys returned to Lars with her son in tow after only a year since the grand wedding. Externally, she was with the son of Bjorn Dniester. She hoped that returning to Lars, she could be with the real man she loved and live happily with the child's real father, but it wasn't to last. When the two reunited, it was as it was before. The love and the passion they felt for one another was as strong and bright as ever. He was a good man. Gerald was comfortable and warm toward her. She was at ease when he was with her. As time went on, Gladys found herself thinking about Bjorn more and more out of guilt. She would smile vaguely at Gerald, and their love became less fervent. Gerald passed away a season later, pistol suicide, and soon after, Carl followed his father after succumbing to a fever. Gladys felt grief like none should ever have to. A lone widow with a lost child. Could there be any worse heartbreak for a single person to have to go through? Although Gladys wept for her lost loves, but as the misfortune passed, Gladys found that her feelings for Bjorn she did not see when she was with him. It was all meaningless though. Gladys tossed the photo table on the chair and flopped onto the bed. She didn't bother closing the window or throwing the curtains over herself. She hoped that she would close her eyes and never have to open them again. Morning came and Gladys did open her eyes again. "Princess, oh my, your highness, please don't do this. Are you really willing to risk your health? I need to go back to Lars. Would you make the arrangements?" Gladys said, lazily pulling herself up from the bed. All Lichen knew the Grand Duke and Duchess would be boarding a boat soon, destined for Lars as they started their honeymoon. "Yes, princess. Do you want to be on the same boat as the Grand Duke and—" The maid didn't get chance to finish her sentence. "What do they have to do with me?" Gladys snapped, staring blankly toward the window. "It's all pointless." With that, Gladys fell back onto the bed. Port Schuber was overcrowded with people and crates of supplies piled high and looked like a miniature mountain range. The port was always busy when cruise ships were set to depart, but today it was twice as busy as usual. Along with the normal crowds, there added to it all the people that had come to see the ducal couple set off on their honeymoon. This more than doubled the number of people stood dockside. Going on another honeymoon to his ex-wife's country was quite surprising to a lot of people, and what really tipped people over was the fact that his ex-wife was getting on the same boat. Even those who were not interested in local gossip and rumor came out to watch. The more I think about it, the more I notice the princess is doing too much. Too much. Lisa said loud enough for the other maids to hear. They just looked at her disapprovingly, but she didn't care. "Why do we have to share a boat with that awful woman?" Lisa said as she passed by one particular maid who was fond of Gladys. Lisa followed on after Erna, glaring at the prince. He was the culprit behind all of this. Thanks to his being taller and slimmer than most, he stood out, truly like a poisonous mushroom that dazzles and tempts. That is why the Grand Duchess fell for him. Lisa looked at Erna and became distraught. She really did look like a lady that had swallowed a poisoned mushroom. She had that twinkle in her eye every time she looked up at the prince. She tried to hide her true feelings, but Lisa could see the girl in the throes of her first love. I should have used my grandmother's teachings about not falling for guys with pretty faces, Lisa thought to herself. After thinking on it for a long while, Lisa figured her grandmother would probably change her tune upon seeing Bjorn. And anyway, the two are married. There is nothing wrong with a wife looking up at her husband in such a manner. She looked back at the prince. He was so elegant and courteous with Erna, escorting her along the boat to their room. He was perfect, and that was the problem. He was too perfect, and that perfection disturbed Lisa. He must be aware of how Erna feels about him. Everyone else can see it, so surely he can too. Even so, there was a cold aspect in his attitude towards Erna. Lisa felt like the prince was treating Erna like a gentleman's cane, similar to the one he is always seen with. While he walked with Erna, he did not have the cane, but leaned on her like she was one, and he treated her as such. Graceful, formal, but cold and uncaring. Lisa glared at the back of Prince Bjorn's head as they walked through first class. He must have felt it, because the prince turned and looked at Lisa. He considered her like he would consider any insect. Indifferent, not his concern. Lisa felt her heart melt and sink to the basement of her soul. She understood in that moment why all the girls cut out pictures of the prince and stuck them up on their walls. Erna was married to that. Lisa composed herself and redoubled her ardent glare at the prince. "Look at your wife. Isn't she so pretty? Maybe you'd fall in love with her if you just looked." Erna was not one to be merited on her looks alone. She had many beautiful qualities about her, but with the competition being against Gladys, maybe looks was all anyone actually cared about. "If so, I will make you the prettiest lady in the land." Lisa had always been determined in that, and she worked hard at it. She was so proud of how pretty her mistress was, but why doesn't the prince notice how pretty Erna is too? As she looked about, she noticed something on the opposite deck, the enemy, the woman Lisa had nearly forgotten all about. Princess Gladys. The first impression Bjorn got after their first encounter on the boat was, shockingly, a positive one. Bjorn thought it was great that Gladys was holding on to Lichen. It was good to see that this woman, who had given him the shock of his life, was such a great person. It was comforting. "It's been a while, Bjorn," Gladys said. Even in such an embarrassing situation, she remained calm, and Bjorn responded with a gentle but respectful nod. "It's a bit late, but congratulations on getting married." Gladys continued. If it had been any other woman, Bjorn would have just laughed at them for trying to play worn-out tricks, but this was Gladys. Her way of getting at people was with kindness and geniality. Gladys greeted Bjorn once more and like a heroine of some tragic fate, but with the attitude of regality. Gladys led her party away and back on their intended course. The people who had witnessed the scene unfroze and breathed a sigh in unison. "Erna," Bjorn said. Erna had not stopped looking up at him with eyes that trembled like the feathers that adorned her hat. Once Erna had composed herself, Bjorn motioned toward the deck at the end of the boarding ramp with a wink. It was going to be there that the ducal couple would stand in marital bliss for all the people that came to see them off. Erna was obedient, not forgetting her duties. Erna waved to the onlookers, her bright smile never leaving her face. Not like her wedding day, where she had no idea where to look. She was improving remarkably well. Bjorn was proud of his dutiful wife and her ability to learn quickly. She never once mentioned Gladys' name in front of the masses who were eager to stir the pot for any gossip they could get their vulturous claws into. Erna, a woman who is gentle, kind, and not at all annoying. Based on the last 2 weeks, Bjorn's conclusion was pretty much that. She sometimes acted like a rubber ball, bouncing all over the place, but he didn't mind that so much. She was quiet, beautiful, and harmless. She was a woman who perfectly met his expectations, and Bjorn was satisfied. Though, it was still too soon to know for sure. Once they were done with the waving and smiling of greeting the crew and a short tour of the boat, they finally made it to their cabin. Erna started to get agitated. "How can they do this?" Erna said. She looked at the guest room with awe. It was a room that had no business being on a ship. It had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a small solarium filled with palm trees and plants, a spacious drawing room. It made no sense. It felt like mansion. "Look," she rushed over, pointing wildly. "It has a fireplace." Bjorn just laughed. "Your Highness, when will lunch be?" a manservant said, standing in the doorway. He had been watching Erna the entire time. "I'm good, but please, whatever my wife would like," Bjorn said. "Are you not going to eat?" Erna said. Bjorn shook his head and went into his room, leaving Erna behind. Standing among the busy servants who were unpacking their things, Erna felt lost and followed after Bjorn. He had taken off his jacket and laid out on the sofa. The servants that were in here tidying things away left the two alone. "I'll get some rest. It's been quite the day already," Bjorn said. When Erna finally gathered the courage to speak, Bjorn spoke first. I just don't feel like doing anything for a while, is all. Bjorn said. Okay. She felt a little embarrassed, but she agreed. Right up until they left the palace, Bjorn was in meetings and heated discussions. The ministers and officials were strict and obstinate, comparably so with Mrs. Fitz. He must be so tired. You knew that very well. It is too much to beg to do things together, like a spoilt child. Erna knew the things Bjorn had to do and the late hours he had to work. Then shall we have tea? Here, together? Erna said. Erna was curious about the restaurant on the ship, but she was willing to compromise. Unfortunately, Bjorn seemed utterly unwilling to sit at the negotiation table with her and work something out. Let's have dinner together, Bjorn said. Feeling dejected, Erna looked at the clock on the writing desk. It was only 10 in the morning. Bjorn had told her to go spend half the day on her own. Erna was sullen and left Bjorn to his napping. Before she closed the door, she looked back at him in anticipation, but he had thrown off his tie and his eyes were closed. Where would you like to go? I hear the restaurant is quite nice. Would you like to go there for some tea? Lisa asked. Erna smiled awkwardly at the young lady, who approached her with a face full of expectation. Her cheeks flushed as she recalled the conversation they had last night about all the things they could do on a ship the size of a city. Yes, let us have tea, Erna said. You want to go out with me on your honeymoon? Damn you, Prince, Lisa muttered under her breath. Putting Erna on a boat with his ex-wife and then sailing to the ex-wife's land wasn't bad enough. Yes, Your Highness, Lisa said with a light nod, trying to swallow the harsh words that were rising up from inside her. Erna looked at Lisa quietly and smiled brightly. The Grand Duchess smile was so bright, even after losing her gentleman's cane. Lisa became more depressed. It's okay. I can eat dinner by myself, Erna thought. From the ornate centerpiece of woven flowers to the delicate lace tablecloth and silver candlestick holders with engraved swirls. She had never thought she would be able to enjoy such luxury on a ship. She also didn't expect to spend the first days of her honeymoon as a loner. Erna ate the food presented to her slowly. She wasn't hungry, but the servants had put a lot of effort into this, and she didn't want it to go to waste. She had spent the day touring the cruise ship with Lisa. They drank tea, walked the decks, and spent time in the casino. It was a pleasant enough time, but it would have been better if Bjorn had not shunned her and violated by prosecutors. She thought it would have been better in the evening, but when she got back to her room and got changed for dinner, Bjorn was still asleep. After getting married, Erna spent most of her dinners alone over the last 15 days. She attributed that to Bjorn just being too busy, but now they were on their honeymoon, nothing changed. At times, it felt like she was the only person in the world, filling up grand halls with her tiny presence. Starting up conversations with the servants was like talking to herself. They would nod and shuffle away as soon as they could. So she did start muttering to herself. The palace was so vast and empty. Now the boat was vast and empty. Yes, there were people around, but they rarely gave her a second glance. They retreated to shadowy corners to talk about her behind their fans and flat palms. Can I ever be happy? Erna thought to herself, staring down at the food on her plate. Taking a deep breath, Erna slipped a small cut of meat between her trembling lips. It's been a while, Bjorn, Gladys had said after calling his name across the deck. It came again to Erna's mind, trying to block out the echoing sound of busy cutlery. Call my name, Bjorn had said on their first night. They had been a couple, a fact that Erna already knew, scratched her heart again. For her, Bjorn had been her first, but she was Bjorn's second. The feeling crept into her chest like a chill. There was also her husband's nonchalant attitude. It was a sad understanding to realize nothing excited him. There was no feelings of anticipation. It felt like all of this was some boring repetition for him. A dance played out 100 times a day. Erna knew very well that people made bets against her like that. There were many mouths back at the palace. Each voice she tried to block out, but they always reached her. When she was hungry, her mind was weak, and a weak mind is prone to bad thoughts, and bad thoughts brought unhappiness. So the best thing she could do right now is eat well. She stabbed the fork deep into the meat and cut a square as large as her will. She had stuffed it halfway into her mouth when a figure appeared at the door. "Good evening, Erna." "He's awake." She couldn't talk. Her mouth was more than full. Erna grabbed her napkin and made as if to wipe sauce from her face, but disgorged the oversized bite into the cloth. "Don't be embarrassed. The food here is pretty good," Bjorn said. "But I will not soon forget what a big mouth you have." He cast the words with a sly smile. Erna's expression darkened, and she finished wiping her lips and wrapped the meat up in the napkin. She turned to Bjorn, straight-backed. "Well, it would not have happened if you kept to the meal times." Erna said. "Are you angry with me?" Bjorn said, eyebrow cocked. "A little bit," Erna said. She suddenly felt small under his gaze. "Then why didn't you wake me up?" Bjorn responded as if he was the wounded party in this conversation. Is it okay to wake you?" Erna said. When Bjorn had finally woken up, he noticed that it was already past 9. He figured Erna had forgotten their dinner date, so took a lazy shower to wash away the sleep and went to the lounge, only to find his wife sat having dinner by herself, stuffing half a steak into her mouth like some ravenous beast. "Of course. You won't be thrown in jail for waking me for our dinner date." Bjorn laughed. "Well, maybe." They began talking as naturally as if they had been talking the whole day away. At first, Erna was still a little heated, making remarks like she was still trying to express her unresolved anger, but she quickly fell into her usual manner, and they spoke as if considering their usual daily routine, like a chirruping bird. "Is this your first time on a boat?" Bjorn said, a smile on his lips as he listened to Erna talk about her exploration of the cruise ship. "No, second," she replied, pausing as she was putting peas in her mouth. "Really?" "Yes, the first time was when we were on the lake, remember?" Erna said, finally managing to get the peas into her mouth. Not realizing it wasn't a joke, Bjorn burst out laughing. It was always like that. Erna could always make people laugh without trying or even meaning to. The light in the room got brighter, and the gloomy shadows retreated to the corners. It didn't feel so vast and empty anymore. Bjorn laughed until his cheeks tingled and rang the small bell to call the attendant. Soon after, a servant came in with a bottle of wine. As he watched the dark liquid fill the glass, he was reminded of Gladys. Their honeymoon had been much different. She spent most of the time crying or engrossed in other things, while he was busy working. Even as they sat together for dinner, there was not much interaction, like a wall was put up between them. They had not shared a single decent conversation through the whole course of their honeymoon. The servant finished pouring his wine and moved around the table to fill Erna's glass. Just as he tipped the bottle, Bjorn stopped him. "No, do not fill my wife's glass," he ordered. "Why, I can have a drink too," Erna said, frowning at Bjorn. "I know," Bjorn said. "Then why? You have to study."